If everyone can come on in and take their seats, we'd love to get started. It is Mother's Day, and I'm sure there's someone that you're wanting to take to breakfast or brunch or to the greenhouse or something like that. And if you would like to, for those of you who are in the very back row, if you want to move forward, it might be a little bit cozier and we can hear you better. So once again, I just want to say thank you to those of you who are able to be here for this hour-long Q&A. This is an opportunity for us to learn more about Ellen and for you to ask any questions that you might have. And if you need to leave for some reason, that's fine. We just ask you to go off to the side and head out. But again, I just want to express my thanks to the search committee for the work that they have done. And we do have members of the board here and members of search, but I'm going to hand things over to Jim from search to kick us off.
So I'm just going to add how welcome it is and how welcome you are, Reverend Ellen. I think from all the comments I heard, we're off to a wonderful start. And the search committee, of course, is thrilled that she's here. I want to reiterate what Tana just said about if you have to leave, don't feel uncomfortable doing that. We know that people have buses to catch and parking meters to fill and other places to go. So that's just fine if people need to go. This is going to be just kind of an open forum. We ask people to come up this way, so we're not going to pass the mic. We're going to ask you to speak, and then we'll repeat the question if people are unable to hear what you have. So I don't know, Reverend Ellen, do you want to say a word at the beginning? Or?
I would love to lead us in a little centering meditation, centering prayer as part of bringing that greater spirit that I hope to follow into the room with us here. So I invite you, if it's comfortable, to close your eyes, put your feet on the floor if that's relaxing for you, and just feel the weight of your body for a moment on the pew or in your seat. Allow yourself to notice your breath, which centers you. Notice whatever you feel in your body. It could be tension, it could be ease, it could be something else. Notice the thoughts popping in your mind. And know that there is something greater than all those thoughts, something deeper than all our feelings that we can connect with in any moment. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes if you had closed them. And I look forward to hearing anything you have to say.
So who would like to begin? I should say, let's have, Tana, would you ask board members to just raise your hands and let us people know who is on the board? And other search committee members, I see Stephen. And way in the back, I see Joanne. There were 7 of us, and I know some people were here earlier and were here yesterday. And okay, first up, don't be shy. Reverend Ellen is not. Okay, Peter. This is your treatise on belief.
Yes, I heard.
Yeah, we're going to. Yep, we got it.
Oh, repeat the question. I'm sorry.
People from
Well, that was the question, basically. What is your theology, your treatise on belief?
Yep. Yeah, I heard. Yeah, and I heard also something about God. So, so I'll start with God, because I did mention God a couple times, and that's a longer conversation to really go through that completely. But in a short answer, the thought coming to me is that the beautiful collage we created of those stories and those tissue paper, transparent tissue papers, that's us and our stories, and God is the light that shines through that. So in my mind, God is, in my interpretation, what animates us, regardless of where we've come from or where we've been. It's the energy that when we turn towards love and connection with others, that's how love comes through. So that's one working definition of God. I'll also say that conversations about God can touch some of the deepest parts of us, and so those are often really fruitful conversations to have, so I'm really glad that you began there. The other thing I'll say about my theology, and that is also a longer conversation, but just for today, I will say that I believe we all have a spark of the divine. I was not the one to first come up with that. But I believe it, and I believe that that spark is what connects us to this greater love and this greater wisdom that can guide us. And we all have that. So we all have our own connection to that wisdom, and we can each live that. So those are a couple perspectives on God and theology.
Okay, another? Or a follow-up? Who's back there? Roy?
Okay, I'm sorry, because it was kind of complicated. But I was just wondering if you can tell a story of one of your ministries, one of the times where you were at a church, like what you realized from it, how it changed you and the church. It's just sort of asking for a story of what you would go through in being in one of your positions that you had.
You mean a story of?
Oh, kind of like what you would have, come in expecting, and how it maybe changed you, or you changed them.
In a congregation, like
Yes.
a time when something they said changed me, or something I did or said changed them? Interesting. Well, I have a feeling the answer is going to come to me at 2 a.m. tonight. What's that? Yeah, it's a great question. But maybe let me let it simmer, and let me see if something comes to me as we keep talking. I appreciate the question, though. Yeah.
Carrie Sherman, and I was wondering if you could, if there are any theologians or writers that you particularly have found inspiring on your journey to becoming a minister.
The first name that comes to mind is Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun. I voraciously read every book she wrote and every talk she ever gave when I was going through my my re-engagement with religion. So she's a big one. For those who don't know her, she is a Western. She speaks to Buddhist philosophy through a very Western lens that certainly was easier for me to grasp than some of the more traditional Buddhist texts. So that's been really powerful for me. I mean, other theologians, we studied them in school, Reinhold Niebuhr. Of course, I'm not remembering the names right now, but process theology is something that means a lot to me. It's sort of the idea that God lives in the creativity of life. When we create space, that's when, that's where God lives. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
So when you were looking for a church, you'd made the decision to at least look. What attracted you to South Church?
Yeah, so I mentioned some of that in my sermon. I really liked the fact that you have this shared ministry model. That is something that I think is a really strong foundation for a church, because I believe that it is not just in sort of the thinking and reflecting and taking in of inspirational ideas, but in that taking action that we are actually transformed, which is what my hope is, that as a minister, I help people transform their lives in ways that encourage and that they're excited about. The other thing I really appreciated was that history that I mentioned, the grounding in your social justice. The first few ministers, when I was reading the congregational record, just beautiful stories of your founding ministers about their involvement in seeing those people beyond who we, in our culture are mostly focused on. So I really appreciated that. And then, frankly, the shared governance model. I think that it is hard for churches to change. I talk about that with colleagues all the time, how that we are living in a time when, frankly, thousands of churches are likely, I read a statistic recently, thousands of churches are likely to close their doors because they're not able to adapt quickly enough to the changes in our culture and the kind of ministry that people need today. So a church that is willing and engaged in making significant changes to how, not just, kind of how you think about governance, but the implications of it, about you're changing your systems to reflect what you believe in. So the anti-oppressive philosophy that I've heard your leaders talk about as part of that collaborative governance model. So that spoke to me as well. So you're already kind of in the midst of change. So all of those were things. And frankly, why did I click on the link, or why did I I will say, too, that once I met your search committee, I was like, these people are awesome. It just felt good. It just felt good. And I have, frankly, it feels like a little fairy tale. Like every interaction, I'm having feels blessed. So, yeah.
My name is Laura. I'm very new to South Church, so please take this question as a larger Unitarian Universalist question, not specific to this congregation. But kind of going off what you were just talking about, I have been a UU for about 20 years, and I've lived all over the United States. This is my 7th congregation to start to be part of. And one of the observations, I'm in my 40s, one of the observations that I've made at every single one of those churches, and again, I haven't figured that out about South Church yet, is they do a pretty poor job connecting with people between their late 20s and 50, particularly if those people aren't partnered and don't have children. And this has been something that I've experienced at every community I've been part of, even when there have been people in those age groups who have really tried to be really intentional about creating those connections. And so I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it speaks to that adaptive, that change question too. Like, how can congregations adapt? I mean, there's a lot about generational theory, about how different generations need different things from a church community, and I think once a church, serves a certain demographic, it's easy to continue serving that demographic because there's people in it who are furthering that kind of sort of thinking, philosophy, whatever it is that demographic resonates with. So I think, well, one, you have to be really intentional. First, you have to be open to change. Next, you have to be intentional, and then invite those people in that age group. You really have to plant seeds and nurture something. As we have talk a lot about what am I saying? Those in their 20s as well, who've graduated, and how do we help them in their very particular life circumstance? And you have to, congregations hire someone to be explicitly focused on that, for example. So I think it would need conversation. We would need to be intentional about it. If that were something you were interested in, maybe, that could be a conversation if you wanted to help start something. And then it would be a conversation to figure out how best to nurture that. Yeah.
So I saw a question over on this side, and I'm going to invite, there are some younger than me anyway, couples with children who in our last settled ministry, we had, I thought, a pretty interesting program for families. So if somebody wants to speak to that relative to that question later, that would be great. And who has? Deanna.
Hi, I'm Deanna Strand, and this is the 4th time we've met. So this is awesome. I feel like I already know you. But I'm curious to back up your story a little bit from what drew you to South Church, but what led you to search in the first place, to leave your last congregation and look for something new?
Yeah. Westminster, where I have been in East Greenwich, was my first congregation after seminary and a residency. And when I started there, I had, a particular vision for what I was hoping to achieve. And over the course of those 9 years before I started searching, I achieved many of those things and was able to have the kind of, I just was able to do that ministry with them. And at some point, I could tell I wanted something different and wanted to expand and grow in new ways. That in that congregation, I could tell it just wasn't the interest in doing that. So that's when I started looking and looking for the kind of thing that I described before, congregations that are interested in change and growth and trying new things and more of that. Yeah.
I appreciate all the conversation that we've been having, and I was really inspired by your sermon today. I've been coming to South Church since I was 19. I'm 51 now, and I have really not been very committed in all of these 30 years. I'm a single parent. I have an adult daughter with autism, and to speak to you with the 20 to 50-year-old question, I found it challenging to connect in those circumstances. And so I really appreciate that, like the question that you're asking, and I think now that I'm entering my 50s, I might be able to connect a bit more. but I'm just really, it's a very affluent community. And I'm just hoping and wondering like how to connect in sort of the active social justice, being welcoming to sort of those in different circumstances, because I keep coming back. I love the space, I love the people, I love the connections I've made, but personally, like what I loved you saying today is just feeling different. I felt different for the past 30 years, and I haven't even here in South Church found my people. But I connect to others, and that's just something that I'm personally interested in sort of exploring and being more deeply connected to South Church, where I do feel like I can have more time and just sort of your thoughts and reactions to some of these comments.
So let me make sure I heard the key pieces. I think I heard you say that you are not yet feeling connected here, but want to. And you also would like there to be more emphasis on, and you can correct me, on connecting with people, like what I said in the sermon, that that our society tends to overlook. Are those the two key things, or was there, okay. Yeah, so great question. How do you do that, right? So my vision is that we, if we become a we, would take action to both to connect with folks that aren't necessarily in our immediate, easy to connect with circle, and so depending on what we're talking about, like if we're talking about people within the church or people beyond the church, to really listen to folks who are not in our everyday kind of what we're, following, and follow that lead and learn from that wisdom. It's often the people who are not in the mainstream dialogue who have a larger wisdom to offer to all of us. So that's one part of it. I think, one of the things that I appreciated and am glad that I was able to do at my previous church was to, kind of mobilize people to some extent to work together to, we did an anti-racism march together with another organization, and we did a walk for hunger, and we did a bunch of the kinds of things that I think help people. Like, you take one small step as a congregation, and then you grow from that, and you take another step and you grow from that. So those kinds of taking action together tend to also build connections among people. And so it's an organic thing that you have to grow. And it's not something that a minister can do on her own. It really requires everyone to say, oh yeah, right, this is who we are. This is what I believe in. I'm going to go, take action. I'm going to go with, 50 other people to the local march on, Roe versus Wade, or whatever it is that's going on. We're going to take action together. Yeah. So those are some thoughts on that topic. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Sky, and I want to start with a comment and then lay your question out for you. First, we're experiencing not just a new minister, but a new form of governance. So we have two big things to adjust to now. I'm kind of excited about it. However, I'm a little concerned that you have only met people who are enthralled with the idea. There are a lot of people out here who are not. My question is, well, let me say one more thing. I think it's a good idea, but it happened during COVID, when very few of us were engaged in conversations with each other and we weren't coming here. And the meeting at which we made that decision to change our form of governance was a Zoom meeting. So I think there are a lot of people who have never really connected with the idea. My question is, how are you going to pull that together? I think you've got a lot of threads to grab onto there to pull us back. And I don't think people will be opposed to it. But it's a big change, and you know how well humans do change.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, how will I address the fact that not everyone is 100% on board?
Well, not everyone even knows what it is.
Mm-hmm.
In spite of the effort that the current board and Kristen have made to have conversations about what shared governance will look like, there's still, well, you can see who's here now is probably most active. And you've got a lot of people who haven't engaged in that at all. So I'm hoping that you will make a big effort, not a concerted effort, but a big effort to show people how this change could work for us all. Because it's much bigger than the church.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer it now.
No. I mean, my thought is that in some ways, some of that may answer itself, because in my experience, it's the anticipation of something that is like, oh, what is this thing? Like, I don't know what it is. It's different. It's going to change something that I really love about this place or whatever. And those feelings can be, significant, and need to be acknowledged and heard and so on, and have conversations. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that there are some people who aren't interested in having those conversations. And so two thoughts come to mind. I mean, if folks aren't interested, there's so many people who aren't interested in governance at all. And it doesn't, and they come to church and they do their thing that they're interested in, and they never really understand how it works, and that's okay. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I imagine that as this rolls out, because I know your leaders have done a great deal of thinking about it and will continue to do so, people will begin to see, oh, either it doesn't impact me at all, or it impacts me in these positive ways, or it impacts me in these negative ways. I'm going to raise it, and we're going to fix it. So that's my thought about that. But as the board chair, Tana, do you want to say any more? Didn't think you'd be on the hot seat.
No, you're not putting him in the hot seat. That's fine. Well, I think, Sky, your question, I was just sitting here thinking, I need to talk to Sky afterwards. So I think that your question has more to do with a moment in time that this has been happening, which is actually before COVID started. But certainly it's been hard to engage substantively in person with people for a while. And I think perspective is everything. And, there are times where I think the same thing you do, Sky, and then I talk to someone and they say, what? No, of course not. Of course we know what we're doing. And we've been doing this a long time, and everybody knows about collaborative governance. And so you kind of just spoke a little bit to my worry, oh gosh, there are people who are still not familiar. They don't read the 900 emails or the mini services we've had over the last 2.5 years, whatever the case might be. But obviously, everybody comes with their own depth of bandwidth, if you will. I think that what Search would tell you is that one of the things that we've heard from Reverend Ellen is that was one of the things that attracted her to this position. And I think it attracted her to that position in part because the last 2 years have demonstrated how important more than just the minister's role is to the life and the integrity and the sustainability of the church. And so that's been front and center for us. So I think that as we saw today, we see Kirsten in her DLM role and Ellen in her ministerial role, see them really be able to work together nicely, and to see the way in which, as we step into this model officially with a permanent minister, I'm not actually sure people are going to see a big change. And in my line of work, that means it's actually working. In other words, that's what we've been doing for the past year and some odd months or more with Susan, but now we have a permanent minister. And one of the things that I always notice about change a little bit is that, and in these discussions is, in theory, it seems like it's a great idea. And I noticed the 2 times it seems to come up for people is, one, when we're talking about the budget. And I always say, why would we not talk about the budget? That's how we pay these people. Of course, it has budget implications. And second, I heard someone asked me last week, when they saw the congregational agenda, they said, does Ellen know about Kirsten's role?
I did say, who are you?
That's right. The point of that is, I'm pretty sure that person who asked me that is representative of several other people who are thinking the same thing. And I didn't laugh at that person, but I did think to myself, what does that actually mean? And I think what it actually means is that person, because I've also heard this quite a bit in the last little while, is that's not the way we've done it. Well, right there, you just start with that introduction, that's not the way we've done it. I think that tells you that that's where they're coming from. And that's the work that we have to do. And Sky, I'd challenge you as a powerful woman in this church with a long history to maybe be part of the pushback to say, you're right, that's not how we've done it in the past, but that's how we've gotten through COVID, and that's how we're going to get through the future and really step into the future of this church. So let's push past that. That's not how it's been done in the past, and instead think about who do we want to be. Let's step away from the patriarchal idea of one minister who rules this church, and when that minister leaves or that minister has health issues that lead to, what does that mean for us? We are more than one single person, and I think we've seen that in the last 2 years. Or 2, or 3.
I just want to add to that from the perspective of the search committee. Even though we had to go through an extra year to get there, we were much better at articulating what Tana just articulated, and we had candidates who fully understood it, who understood it beyond, oh, I'm a collaborative person. Every minister is a collaborative person, but that is not shared governance. That is not what we were talking about. And most ministers, and I even had one minister say, 2 ministers, I'm not interested. If that's what you're talking about, I'm not interested. So it took us an extra year, but I think from what you've heard from Reverend Ellen, this is something that she believes in and looks forward to and wants to work with us to build. And that's the difference between her and some of the other candidates. Willow?
So I'm just going to, this is Willow Young. I'll just add a little bit to this conversation as well. I think it's important. I loved the question when you asked, well, you know, who's actually interested in governance or not interested in governance? And as the secretary, I was actually one raising my hand and not interested in governance, which seems kind of ironic, but what I look at here is we're moving more and more into a community that sustains itself, that ministers to itself, that empowers ourselves, and that it's not that we're calling just a minister or a shepherd, but a companion to do that with us. And that to me is really what sort of an almost egalitarian way of being is. Oh, that's called collaborative leadership. Okay, great. You know, I want to make sure we don't feel like we're getting hung up on a particular single concept when we can see something bigger that's available to us.
Anybody want a first turn before I hand it back to Roy? Okay. You don't. Holly does not need the mic, she says. Okay, we'll see, Holly. How do you feel about non-human animals?
In terms of theologically, I gather, like,
Any way you want to answer.
well, so I'll answer theologically. I think that non-human animals have spirit and soul, and that humans and non-human animals are in this together, and we connect with each other in special ways. And I think that there are many ways we have been conditioned to disconnect from the natural world. And so the ways in which humans have found that connection with animals is precious and to be nurtured. But I'm curious what prompts the question. What does it mean to you? Yeah, what prompted you to wonder about that?
I guess just very simply because for me, nature and all of the creations in it are God, along with love is also the goddess. But I've just animals have been a really big part of my personal and professional wide variety of careers. And I have just come to believe that how we interact with other animals on the planet, whether that means wildlife or domestic animals that we share, that become part of our family, I've just come to find that those relationships tell me a lot about somebody or people in general. So I just felt spontaneously compelled to just throw that crazy question out there.
Well, I have a best friend named Daisy who lives down the street from me, and she's a dog. She loves it when I come visit. I don't have any animals of my own. I'm allergic to many of them, but I love the animals that my friends have.
Ellen, there is a question from Lori Bilby on the live feed, and she would like to know what you see as the most important hallmarks of a healthy congregation.
Bye. I would say clear communication. I would say that leaders and others being able to articulate what they see without attachment, and others being able to and willing to also articulate what they see or what they want, also holding it loosely so that we can then come to that sweet spot among all of our different needs and hopes and where we're coming from. So I think that is really important to have the space for clear and direct communication. I think involvement, I was pointing to that before. So, you come to church, you take in something from that experience, and there's always a possibility for more as you connect with others and live the values that are central to a congregation. So I think that is a hallmark of a healthy church. And then the vertical. So having spiritual practices that members of the congregation engage in to deepen their own connection to that grounding force that gives us all a little more wisdom and a little more, makes us all a little more loving and a little more tolerant and so on, and helps us to dissolve those barriers that are between us. So I think a congregation where everyone is encouraged and people do practice some kind of spiritual practice is also a hallmark of a healthy congregation. Yeah.
So I saw Mitch's hand, and then Tana gave me the 5-minute warning about 4 minutes ago. So Mitch, I think you might be the last one unless there's something really pressing.
Mitch Pivor from the Committee of Ministry,
Okay,
which I
great.
hope you all get to know over the next year or two, which was reorganized to help support the collaborative leadership and governance in their roles. But I just wanted to get back to what Roy was saying to give you a final note as far as we heard about your journey to the ministry. What was just some of the areas that in your current ministry over those years where you found to be grown the most in a few different categories as a minister and as a person?
I couldn't hear the question. Where
over the last your
couple
ministry,
categories that
how you have grown as a minister from when you started and as a person in just a few areas of all of those years of your wisdom.
Right. Well, I would say that when I started ministry, I was coming out of 5 years of seminary and then this residency, full of lots of ideas, really good ideas that I shared with leaders. And some of them were like, we love that, let's do it. And others, they just weren't, it didn't quite fit. So I think for me, part of where I've grown is in holding all of that. Like I have all those ideas, they're good. And, where is a group of people actually at? And also, what are the emotional systems that are kind of holding those beliefs in place? And what is my role in helping to loosen that up so that we have the possibility for more creative ministry? So I would say it has to do with being attentive to those relationships among the congregation, to the emotional system, and to my role in helping to loosen that up.
Could I add one thought from your ministerial record?
Please.
One was you said it today, a former roadblock of perfectionism. And I seem to remember that from the ministerial record as one other thing you've learned.
Yeah, so letting go of perfectionism, in other words, yeah. Well, and that actually gets to, because you were going to ask me what else I might want to ask or say. So I am freeing myself from perfectionism. Note the present tense. And I need to be very intentional about that. And I spoke about, kind of not wanting to just give in to expectations, but being intentional about following my understanding of God. And that is something that I want to express now. So as a new person coming into a system like this, you all have certain ideas of what a minister could be or should be, what you want, what you don't want. My tendency would be to try to be and not be all of those things. That will drive me crazy, and you as well. So I am being very intentional about being clear about who I am, where I'm coming from, and honoring that larger truth, that third way, not resisting expectations, but not necessarily giving in to them, but discerning a deeper truth in whatever the system is that reflects where I'm coming from. So where I can say what I see, and then you can say what you see, and we come up with whatever it is, using that. So I wanted to make sure to say something about that I am planning to be intentional about both noticing what those expectations are that are in the system, and I welcome you to tell me, like, this is what I want. Not because I can be that necessarily, but just for me to know that that's out there, or this is what we don't want, and this is what I don't want, whatever that is. And I will say that for my part, and this is connected to my theology, where we all have a spark of the divine, like my role in the system is to define myself, to say what I see, and your role is to do the same. And it's less the Wizard of Oz and more the guy behind the curtain who's just a regular person doing their best to follow God or wisdom or love, and showing that journey so that others then can follow their own spirit and their own wisdom in their own way, rather than me kind of having the answers, so to speak. So I had written some of that down. It didn't come out quite the way as I had written it, but something about that kind of awareness of the expectations versus, who I am, and trying to, and particularly this week, wanting to be as clear as I can about who I actually am, so that when you vote, you're voting for me, not for a projection of what you imagine a minister could be or should be. And also my hope is, going back to that idea of we each have a spark of the divine, we each therefore have responsibility for our own spiritual journey. And so I hope that when you vote for me, but really more you vote for you and your spiritual journey and your commitment to that journey, and helping to create the kind of community that you long for. So that is my hope, to kind of share that message over the course of the week, so that Sunday becomes an opportunity to vote for yourself as well as for me.
All right, that's a wonderful way to end. Thank you, Reverend Ellen. I just want to remind people that up on the webpage there is everything that's happening this week, all the opportunities to talk with Reverend Ellen and others in the leadership about where we're going and what we're doing and what we hope for. So don't miss those opportunities. You'll be busy all week if you do them all. There are quite a lot there. Tana, maybe you have a final word?
Again, thank you so much for being here. Feel free to reach out. Ellen has office hours on Thursday morning, I believe. And that actually might be a really great time if you're looking for one-on-one time, or to stop by and ask a particular question that you may not ask in a group setting. There are office hours.
I don't think so.
No?
Are there? No.
What? Am I crazy? Oh my God, retraction entirely, 100%. Yeah, oh my God, fire me now. That is so wrong. Okay, I've missed the boat on that one entirely. Never mind. There are many opportunities, as Jim said. I have nothing new to add. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Don't forget to celebrate the women in your life today. Thank you.